Part 2 at Challaghey School, Chapter 12 Under the Arch. We've reached Challaghey, yet we are not really there. We're just at the entranceway, dropped off by a farmer who was kind enough to let us hitch a ride on his buckboard wagon, seeing as how he was passing by here on his way to his farm 10 miles further down the road. All I can make out of the buildings of this Indian boarding school is that they look tiny, like those in a kid's toy town. They're so far away down a dusty red road. Over 8,000 acres, Pop says. Imagine that. Around us in every direction is rolling prairie. It's easy to understand why they called it Plains View. There's a plain view here for sure. Above us is a metal archway 30 feet high. Challaghey, the big metal letters twisting across the top read. Below it, in smaller letters, maybe a foot high each, are the words Indian Boarding School. There's also a design perched on the top in the center. It's some sort of cross with each of its sides twisted. It makes me think of a whirlwind. As I look at it, something starts to happen. The world spins around, and then I'm somewhere else. I'm on a broad avenue with big white buildings. There are people all around me, mostly men, marching along. Some are in uniforms, others in civilian clothing. They're carrying signs I can't quite read. People are watching and calling out encouragement. Everyone is happy and excited, except me. I know something awful is about to happen. I look around for my father. I have to warn him, but I can't find him, and now I'm hearing the rumble of tanks coming toward us. You all right, Cal? Pop says. I nod, but I'm not okay. For just a moment, I feel angry at my father, angry and worried both. Then I feel angrier at myself. I can't give in to my feelings of uncertainty. I can't let myself be held back by what is probably just a daydream because I'm feeling so anxious. I take care of you, you take care of me. Right now, taking care of Pop means making it possible for him to do what his heart is telling him he has to do. And the battle he plans to fight isn't just for himself. It's for me and him. And it's for every other doughboy now being neglected by an ungrateful nation. I have to try to do the best I can. Pop is counting on me. I straighten my back and step out. Pop marches beside me, our feet raising like dust clouds from the bone-dry road. I start counting cadence to myself. Hup, 2, 3, 4. Hup, 2, 3, 4. We've gone at least a mile. The air's less dry now. We're passing between two small lakes, one on either side of the road. There's a bridge in front of us to cross. Far off to the left is the dam that created those shallow lakes from a creek. The smell of the water around us is as sweet as summer rain. Water's a blessing, something no farm can live without. We had plenty of water on our farm thanks to our deep well and a brook that ran year-round. It flowed down through the lower 40 where our 2 cows and horses grazed. It hurts remembering that. So I turn my mind back to counting. Hup, 2, 3, 4. As we continue, the buildings growing larger, I see there's more of them than I realized. The most distant ones are big, finely built white structures with red roofs. Those must be the houses Pop told me about, where the Indian students live. This road leads directly to the front of the biggest one, white limestone, 4 stories tall, with wide steps that lead up to an elevated porch. It looks more like a governor's mansion than how I imagined an Indian school building would be. Hup, 2, 3, 4. And there are more buildings to either side of us. They surround a big open area, only partially visible through the closest building. Print shop, Pop says, nodding to the right. Tailor shop next to it, then harness making a shoe repair. He looks to the left. Academic hall there. He looks beyond them farther to the left. Stock barn. The stock barn is way off. I can barely make out its wavery outline in the heat already building up, though it's not yet been mown. The shapes that look tiny as ants must be horses or cows in the pasture behind it. So far, though, we've seen no people. Is it because this is a Sunday? Does everyone leave the school on the weekends? As is often the case, Pop senses what I'm thinking. Once a month, you get permission to go into town, he says, pausing to stretch his stiff leg. But today's Sunday. Might they be inside at services? He looks up at the sun. Nope, about 11 a.m., he says. We miss Sunday school. Every one of us not Catholic had to go to it. Catholics always had their worship an hour earlier. So I expect they are getting set for parade. Parade, what's that? Pop offers no further explanation. He just starts walking again. I set off behind him trying to keep up. Hup, 2, 3, 4. I continue the count in my head. as we get closer to that big open area. Hup, 2, 3, 4, whoa. Those shouted words were not in my head. We stopped walking and turned toward the sound of tromping feet. From around the corner of the academic building comes a whole company of marching soldiers. More than 40 of them. Hup, 2, 3, 4. That cadence is being counted by the officer walking beside them, watching with an eagle eye to make sure no one is out of step. Hup, 2, 3, 4, right! They turn to swing past us. They're close enough now for me to see they're all about the same age. Maybe 3 or 4 years older than me. At first they look the same, all in military attire, hair cut short, caps low on their foreheads. Only their brown faces suggest they're Indian. Though I see some among them whose skins are as pale as a white man, plus a few whose complexions are as dark as a Negro's. Double time, march! Their feet start moving faster. So perfectly in step they might be one giant, many-legged being. Not a face turns our way as they pass. My mouth has fallen open, watching them. It's a stirring sight, and also a little disturbing. Is marching like that what I'll be expected to do? Left, march! They turn us toward that big, broad expanse of brown grass. No sooner have they passed than I hear the approach of another company. As they round the corner, they're moving just as smartly as the first group we saw, and others are coming into view behind them. Company after company goes marching past. The student soldiers are getting progressively smaller as each company passes us. The youngest ones, who look like second or third graders, are fewer in number. They are having some trouble staying in step, which makes me feel a bit better. Hup, 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 hup. Finally, the last group passes us. I didn't try for an exact count, but I'd guess they've numbered more than 400. Pop and I follow those marchers. It's not clear where they were coming from, but it is dang sure obvious where they're going. The open area ahead of us, the center of which looks to be a football field. As we get closer, I hear the sound of the drums and horns. They were barely audible over the thudding of those hundreds of marching feet moving in time to that music. John Philip Sousa, Pop says, best marches ever written. I nod my head. Have to admit, it makes my heart beat a bit faster. At the far end of the field are bleachers. In front of those stands is the source of that stirring music. It's a big band, made up of Indian students dressed in uniforms much more colorful than those of the marchers. Some are banging on drums of all sizes. Others are playing horns, including a gigantic tuba twice as big as the boy blowing into it. Just behind them is all the rest of the people. Those bleachers are filled with more seated spectators than marchers. So many, it makes my head spin. I've never been around so many folks all at once. It makes me feel small. Half of those in the stands are females, most dressed alike. From the smallest little girl to the biggest young woman, they're wearing baggy long dresses with vertical stripes and ribbons in their hair. About the same number of girls as there were marching boys. In the very center of the stands, set apart from those female students, are adults. They stand out because their clothing is not at all the same and far from military. Some of the men in suits look as dignified as foreign dignitaries. Among the women are ladies whose bright dresses are big. Feathered hats make them look like exotic birds. We're in luck, Pop says to me as we approach the stands, staying well to the side. Got here just in time for the weekly dress parade. Though none of those marching students turned an eye our way, that's not true of the folks in the stands. We've been noticed for sure. Some of those grown-ups are staring at us. We slip our packs off our shoulders and take seats off to the side of the bleachers. Just look at that, Cal. My, oh my. I turn toward the direction Pop's indicating. Some of the squads of marching boys and young men are performing intricate maneuvers. The youngest ones, who had made some pretty obvious missteps as they passed, have now halted. They're all standing at attention to the right of the parade ground. The older boys are competing for privileges, Pop explains. Extra desserts, maybe release from some duties, plus the best squads get advances in rank. They might even still be giving medals like they did in my day. It seems to me as if every single person in those competing companies is perfect, but Pop's practice eye is sharper than mine. Oops, he says. That second company there, third from the left, just took a wrong step. Plus the boy behind him has his cap at the wrong angle. No rewards for them today. Those two are going to be in hot water tonight with their fellow squad members. Never mind what the drill master thinks. Last thing you want to do is let your company down. 10 to 1, they'll have to stand at attention till midnight in their dormitory. I do not think Pop even realizes how nervous everything he's saying is making me. I don't show it, of course, nor do I say anything, but I can imagine myself as the one who takes a wrong step, trips, and brings the whole line down on top of him. They'll likely stand me in front of the firing squad for that. I'm ready to run away from Challagie Indian School before I've even spent my first hour here. How do you like the music? Pop asks. The maneuvers are being done to the music being played by a good-sized marching band standing directly in front of the crowd. They are mostly playing drums, though now and then some horn players join in, including one with a tuba, about twice his size. I have to admit that I do find the sound stirring. It almost makes me move my own feet. Now look there, Cal, Pop says. He indicates with a turn of his chin a long-nosed, hatless man in a light brown suit who is standing at the front of the stands on a small raised platform. He's tall and his posture is slightly stoop-shouldered, almost like a heron that's just waded into a pond looking for frogs. His right hand, which seems unusually large, surrounds a microphone set up in front of him. Know who that is? It's not really a question for me to answer. I know Pop is going to tell me. That is the superintendent, Mr. Morrell, Pop says. He was the head AG teacher, or ag teacher, when I was here. Only classes I ever gave a hoot for. I heard he got promoted. Smartest thing he ever did, putting him in charge. Pop pokes me in the side with his elbow, and he is the main reason why I'm sure you'll be let in, even if it is halfway through the school year. Why? Because he knows you? Pop raises an eyebrow at me, maybe a little surprised at my speaking up like that. Then he shakes his head. More than that, he says. The band suddenly stops playing. The marchers come to a halt, ranged in a dozen ranks that spread in a wide line facing the spectators. Each company is separated from the next by 10 feet or so. The company farthest to the right is so close to us that I can see the sweat on their brows. A sound, like a hammer hitting a nail, comes out a loudspeaker. Pop and I both turn to look back toward the center of the stands where most of the adults are gathered. Superintendent Morrell taps the microphone again and with one finger. This on? 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 Echoes across the crowd. A smile crosses the superintendent's face. Yes, I guess it is, he says. He scans the crowd. He's taking everything in, including Pop and me. His eyes rest on us for a split second, and he nods. Then he holds up an enormous left hand. Everything gets quieter. I want to thank our student companies for their excellent performance this Sunday morning, he says in a deep, mellow voice. Shall we give them a round of applause? The assembled crowd, including Pop and me, all start clapping. There's also a fair amount of shouting from the girl students. Not exactly shouting, though. They're making an echoing sort of call. It's nothing like the cat calls or sarcastic hooting I've heard from the stands during the few baseball games I've seen. There is something old and strong about it. It stirs me even more than the drum music did. Makes a shiver go down my spine. Some of the young men at attention in the drill squad closest to us are shifting their shoulders, standing up even taller. That's especially true of one boy, 2 rows back from the front. I'd already noticed him because he looks sort of familiar. A scar twisting down his cheek from his ear to his chin makes him memorable. Despite that scar, his face has a friendly look to it. There's also the hint of a mischievous smile there. Superintendent Morrell clears his throat when the sounds die down. Along with the rest of the crowd, I turn my attention back to him. I wish to welcome you all here today to see this fine display of discipline and wholesome competition. Principles that Challagie attempts to ingrain in our boys and girls as we mold them to meet a world so different from that in which their savage forebears lived. Humph, Pop says, a sound he may not even know he's making. I've heard it before when something doesn't sit well with him, like a man mistreating a horse. That humph is usually followed by Pop stepping in to give that person what for. All he does now, though, is cough loudly into his hand. Brr! The only one, aside from me, who seems to notice that boy with the scarred face. His eyes flick toward us, and his lips move, just for a moment, into an actual smile. Then he winks at us. So, Superintendent Morrell continues, the moment you have been waiting for, my judges and I, he looks back at 2 other people seated behind him who nod their heads in agreement, have decided that today's honor Honors go to the 11th graders of Blue Company. He gestures toward the squad of boys 2 ranks to the left of us. Step forward, men. 2 steps forward. Hut! The drill master barks, and the 11th graders of Blue Company move as one. A group of girls stand up from the front of the bleachers. They pass out ribbons to each of the boys, who accept them with their right hands while keeping us front. In a few cases, though, some of those boys briefly grasp, as if by accident, the fingers of the girls who have been given them those honors. Pop chuckles, just like when I was here. They may try to keep the boys and girls apart, all sorts of rules and penalties if you're caught fraternizing, but we'd still find ways to get together. The girls retreat to their seats, but not without quite a few of them glancing over their shoulders at particular boys, all of whom are attempting to look impassive. Thank you all, the superintendent says. You are dismissed. The loudspeaker distorts his voice into a loud squeak at the end. It's like a signal for the ranks of the uniformed boys and young men to disintegrate into a disordered crowd. Caps are removed, jackets unbuttoned, some boys start scuffling playfully, new groups are being formed as friends join one another. None of the adults, their teachers, and advisors seem to be concerned about the roughhousing. Most are heading off on their own. A few men, though, who look like they might be Indian themselves, are talking and joshing with the boys themselves. Former students, Pop says. Challaquii likes to hire back its best graduates. Despite that atmosphere of ease among the boys, order is being kept among the female students. Older women are herding them away from the boys. Pop notices me watching all this. House matrons, he says, smiling, but they can't keep watch all the time. You can't count the number of marriages that have come out of old Challaquii. He studies the groups of male students now moving away from us in all directions. I see another thing hasn't changed much, he says. Those boys there look to all be full-bloods, and over there, he nods toward a group of young men with much lighter hair and paler faces. 10 to 1, those come from families so mixed that they are less than 1/8 and don't know a word of Indian, speak only English at home. You can bet they get called Stahitki. Sta what? That word was strange. Even the way he pronounced it was unlike anything else I've ever heard from his mouth. Stahitki, he says again, saying it slower so I can get it. I notice that his lips don't move as he says it. It means white man. I don't have a white face, but until 2 days ago, I thought I was white, or Stahitki, as Pop called them. Is that what the boys in the school will call me? White man, Pop says again, Stahitki. As he speaks that word, a shadow falls across our feet. William Blackbird, is that you? We turn to look up at the man who spoke. He's standing with the rising sun directly at his back, so bright it is hard to make out his face. But I know who it is. Having heard that voice of his so loud and recent, it's the superintendent. Pop moves his pack off his lap and stands up. Superintendent Morrell holds out his arms, grasping Pop's elbow with his left hand as he vigorously shakes with his right. It is you, isn't it? You could say that, Pop replies. Superintendent Morrell turns to me, releasing Pop's hand from his huge paw. And who might this be? No, do not tell me. Your son, from the look of him, the very image of his father. My boy Cal, Pop agrees. Sir, I say, nodding my head. Then I hold out my hand, ready to have it crushed. To my surprise, though, the superintendent's big mitt makes mine disappear right up to the wrist. His pressure is firm but light. Young man, he says, am I correct in assuming your father has brought you here to join us? Although it is, his voice taking on a teasing tone, far from the start of the regular school year. Yes, sir, I reply. Superintendent Morrell nods down at me. Good manners, he says, excellent. He's so close, I can smell something on his breath. Mints, I think. My conjecture is proven right away. He reaches into his coat pocket, extracts a red striped lump, shucks off the cellophane, and pops the candy into his mouth. Your father, he says, sucking on the mint, had quite a record here at Challaquii. Unforgettable, some might say. A fair student in the academic realm, but top-notch in agricultural skills. Promising, when he was not running away. 2 times in 4 years, was it? 3, Pop says. If you count when I enlisted. Superintendent Morrell smiles broadly, disclosing a gap between his 2 front teeth. I do not, he says, answering the call of duty to one's country cannot be called running away, rather running to. From what I heard, you acquitted yourself quite well as a soldier, William. You could say that. The superintendent nods, then gestures at me with an open left hand. So, he says, why now? My father breathes in and then out, the way he does when he means to make his words count. We had a farm, he says, his voice slow and clear. Lost it to the bank. Cal was in school. That got closed down when there were not enough kids left. I have hopes now to get my bonus money and get us another farm. Until then, I want Cal to be back in school. The superintendent nods his head up and down when Pop finishes speaking, looking even more like a heron as he does so. Ah, he says, good enough. We are a bit down in numbers. There could be room. If he is a good student, he is, Pop says, and a hard worker, that too. Then we may find a place for him here. Interested in agriculture science, young man? Yes, sir, I reply. Then, seeing more of an answer as expected, I force myself to add, I like farming. The superintendent slaps his hands together, producing a sound so loud I almost jump back. Excellent. As your son, an enrolled member of the Creek Nation, there's no question that the government will subsidize him. He shakes his head. You might be amazed at how many, unlike your boy, have sought a place here in recent years with no degree of Indian blood or claim to being Indian, Negroes in particular. Unlike your years here, the number of full-bloods has declined greatly. Less than half. Your race might be bred out of existence before achieving the full benefits of civilization. I wait for Pop to mention that I am already fully civilized, a gentleman of the road, and half white. But instead, he just sighs. Are we set then? Pop asks. There are certain forms, the superintendent replies. Can I fill them out now? Pop asks. Hoped by coming this early I could settle my boy in time to catch a train. Superintendent Morrell nods. He turns and makes a broad gesture toward one of the big-hatted women who'd been seated to his right. She's a bone-thin lady with brown hair framing an angular face that looks washed clean of all expression. She's wearing white from her hat to her calf-length dress, stockings and shoes. She's watching us the whole time the superintendent was talking with Pop, sort of expectant. Soon as he gives her that wave, a purposeful look comes onto her face. She nods, stands up, straightens her shoulders, and strides off. The superintendent pivots back our way. My office, he says, popping another mint into his mouth. We shall do the paperwork, despite it being a Sunday. I think the Lord will forgive us. Then he turns and begins striding long-legged across the grass oval, us tagging along behind him. He didn't notice the look I'm certain is on my face right now. I'm dizzied by how fast things are happening. I want to grab Pop's hand and ask him not to leave me, but I am not going to make it harder for him to do what he's decided he has to do, even though I feel like I'm carrying a ton of weight. We have not walked 20 feet, though, before Pop puts an arm around my shoulders. Cal, he says, his voice is kind. This is a lot for you to absorb all at once. You gonna be all right? It's okay, I say, somehow keeping my voice calm. I'm ready.